Welcome to the K in Clarity podcast. I'm the host, Mezue. During this episode, we're joined by Shannon Aylesworth, founder and CEO of Ursamin. Shannon Aylesworth has been instrumental in advancing care coordination and patient empowerment within the digital health and healthcare technology space, driving holistic, accessible healthcare delivery for some of the most vulnerable patient populations. With Ursamin, she has pioneered a care coordination platform designed to help clinicians more effectively manage patients with multiple chronic conditions by reducing administrative burdens and streamlining communication among care teams. Aylesworth's leadership is rooted in both personal mission and industry expertise, leveraging over 2 decades of experience in building and scaling high-performance technology platforms. She launched Ursamin to address the critical challenges faced by patients with complex care needs, prioritizing collaborative solutions that connect patients, family caregivers, and providers through a unified platform that supports shared care plans and real-time interventions. Her accomplishments include guiding Ursamin toward recognition as an innovator in simplifying health data management, supporting caregivers in crisis, and empowering patients to take control of their health outcomes. She has been celebrated as a top 100 woman in health tech for her transformative impact and is a frequent thought leader on the intersection of digital health and compassionate care. In this conversation, we discuss her insights on the challenges and opportunities in healthcare innovation. She discusses her personal experiences with care coordination, the importance of data flow, and the role of AI in improving patient outcomes. If this is your first time tuning in, here's the gist. The healthcare industry is buzzing with innovations, but there's a lot of noise and misconceptions out there. That's where we come in. Because of my experience in the healthcare ecosystem, I've gained a unique vantage point into the industry's inner workings. We'll bring you the conversations that typically happen behind boardrooms and strategy sessions, the real challenges, innovative solutions, and game-changing insights that are reshaping healthcare as we know it. On this podcast, we're bringing you face-to-face with the industry's leading healthcare founders, executives, and innovators. We're talking about the nitty-gritty of building and scaling healthcare companies, the hurdles they've overcome, and the strategies that have led to their success. More importantly, we dive into the personal challenges that come with trying to change a system as complex as U.S. healthcare. So whether you're a healthcare entrepreneur, a medical professional, or just someone passionate about the future of healthcare, this podcast is your backstage pass to the minds shaping the industry. Now let's have Shannon tell us a little bit about themselves. Welcome, Shannon, to the K in Clarity podcast. For the people listening, can you give a brief overview of who you are and what it is you do?
Absolutely. Thank you. Shannon Aylesworth. I'm founder and CEO of Ursamin.
So over here, we usually like to do an icebreaker before we jump into the questions. And my question for you is, if you had a magic wand, to really go over and fix the challenges in care coordination and everything that's going on in healthcare, what would it be and how would you actually affect that change?
It's a good one. I was thinking about it like, what would I want as a patient? That's what I always think about. Like, what would I want? I would love to have an app that tells me what to do. I hate to say that, but I do. I think we all have these diseases. We're all trying to figure it out. The amount of time that we waste trying to figure it out, trying to be part of the solution. We're asked to be part of the solution. How do we get our information, our health journey paired up with the expertise and the medical knowledge that's available? It's amazing what these clinicians know. And most of us don't have enough access to them. We don't have enough clinicians for what we're dealing with. And so I actually started building that. So how would I affect that? That was the first rev of my product, was to build out the patient side, because it was something I wanted so bad. And it's about, you have, my own situation. I have sinusitis and back pain, and it looks like this, and we're all different. We're all different people. And so the traditional, everybody goes to PT, everybody does this. The legacy healthcare system is very acute instance. Somebody's really sick, you break your back, you go through a process. We're now dealing with living with chronic conditions, and that requires our own contribution to our health journey and our quality of health, and we don't know enough about it to be able to know what to do. So I find myself all the time, and my friends and the doctors, and they're like, we want patients to engage, and I'm like, yeah, but we don't know. We don't know what that is. So to me, that's what coordination of care is. It's about helping you figure out and manage your journey as you go through the healthcare system. So it's an app. It's an app, and that is the end dream. You got to fix it to get there, though, because that's the big problem. Is to get to that vision, we have to fix some of the infrastructure and to get there, and then you're able to make that app really work. If you don't bring all those pieces together, which takes time and smarts, you can't get that.
Okay. Okay. Going from there, I know obviously you've been in very perilous, journeys and understanding what it takes to actually become a founder. And obviously there's facing setbacks. So how have you really thought about persistence in your founder journey and what's really kept you going as you've gone through?
Perilous. I've never heard the word perilous as a founder, but there are days it feels perilous. It's terrifying a lot of times. The persistence is my why, my mom, now my dad, myself, my friends. I talk to people. I have friends. I have advisors. I forget to do that, to reach out more. They're like, I was actually chat GPTing the other day how to get out of a funk because I was in one, and I was just kind of distraught. And they're like, reach out to your friends. I'm very proud of chat for saying that. Reach out to the people who have been through it before and know that it's not a journey. It's not an idea. You hear these stories. Somebody got up and all of a sudden they created saran wrap. Like, I don't know if you know, like saran wrap. It's like, no, there was years of getting people to understand the need for saran wrap and how it could work. And there's apps like Instacart. If you read this book, Cold Start, good mentor of mine, said, read this. And I've read it, and you read all the stories about Uber and Instacart, all these guys 10 years in the making. But they look like an overnight success. And they're not. They were previous companies. So it's really about knowing and surrounding yourself with previous founders who know the journey is not easy, who know that everything you're doing is not abnormal. Every setback you have is, oh yeah, that happened to me. Get up. And then, I've got people on my direct team. I'll tell you, there's a woman on my team that I still credit last December when I said I was on the floor in a fetal position. Not literally in the fetal position, but I was on the floor staring at the ceiling like, I don't know how to, I can't go. And she called me and she's like, you get your fanny off the floor and you keep going. And I was like, but I can't. And she's like, you can. Just, you're going to do it. And so like the next 3 weeks, she basically mentally handheld me through the beaten down side. So persistence is all about having a why, and then having people also say, listen, this is the hard part. Got to dig in and keep going and know that, people have all done it before. You're not alone.
That's true. That's absolutely true. I think those are the important things that to human psychology. You have your why and you have the people around there that you love to work with to help you get to that goal and to that mission. So that makes complete sense.
Yeah. Yep.
I know as well when we talked, you experienced firsthand the fragmentation of healthcare. Can you share with the audience, the journey that you had there, especially with your mother and everything that happened?
Yeah. Yep. So my mom got sick in 2005. She was diagnosed COPD and emphysema. She had smoked. So she had COPD and emphysema. And then she had this, mysterious lung issue that could have been from something, didn't know, started poking around. So they were like, oh no, this is suspicious. But for anybody who knows, doesn't know, lung biopsies are very dangerous. And where hers was, it was the lower lobe down in the bottom part of it. And it's very dangerous. And so they were watching it like they do all suspicious blobs, I'll call it. I don't know, there's a medical term for that. And we went through a long time of like, oh my God, like she's going to die tomorrow. But it was never really conclusive. It was just this ongoing system problem. And nobody knew what her story was. And every time they referred us to a new doctor because they didn't know what it was, then it was a new doctor and you have to repeat. You have to keep telling the whole story. And you got to go through all the battery of tests. And so that was 12 years of, I took her to National Jewish Health in Denver and they were wonderful. They brought in 6 doctors and they were like, listen, we don't do this guy really wants us to go do a biopsy. Very dangerous. We're do no harm. We decided do no harm. So the last kind of like decision point on her lungs was do no harm. Don't touch it. Mom didn't want to do any biopsy. She's like, listen, they're like, if it's not aggressively moving, then chances are it's not. And so we were pretty calm from, I think it was 2015 when we did that. And then a year later, she had this crazy flame up of her pancreas. And the whole system started again. She ended up jaundiced and septic and in and out of the hospital. I remember her walking out of the house and I was like, oh my God, she's orange. And repeat sepsis, and kept getting readmitted because they weren't giving her the right meds. There's a lot of errors, that had we had one view in participation in helping the doctors understand how to manage her, and not knowing and not looking at her lungs. Long story short, after a year of this craziness of acute, because her pancreas has shut down her bile duct, they decided to say, well, let's go aggressive. We believe it's pancreatic cancer, but there was no conclusive diagnosis. And so we had gotten her into the family medicine doctor. Family medicine said, she's getting better after we got a stent in. There's a long story. I'm trying to make this not too long for people listening. To get the stent in the bile duct, and we got her healthy. We stopped the insanity of sepsis by getting her to a New York City doctor who did this procedure all day long to open up her bile duct. And she was getting better. And then she went to the oncologist, and the oncologist said, well, these numbers say it's very aggressive cancer, even though none of it was conclusive. And we kept saying, no, 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 no. She has lung issues. She's got all these other conditions. And my sister, who's a nurse, knew better than the rest of us. I was a technologist. I'm like, I just wanted to save my mom. And she's like, Shannon, where are we going with it? Even if they do it, she's 73 years old. She's got all these other complications. Don't do it. She went into the oncologist room with my dad, and they decided to do the chemo because she was more afraid of whatever this was than she was of the damage that chemo could do. So she only lasted 2 months. The number one side effect of chemo is irreparable scar tissue in your lungs, and she was already compromised in her lungs from the COPD and emphysema. So my sister knew, and we didn't know, and the doctors really weren't paying attention to, was that her lungs couldn't handle that treatment. And so, yeah, and then when we told primary care, she was like, she was getting better. She goes, those numbers, those markers that they decided to do chemo on, they came down. They went from 13,000 to 200. She goes, that's not cancer. If your number comes like that, that's not cancer if it drops like that. And we're like, so she was devastated. We were devastated that it was unnecessary and it killed her. And it could have been prevented had the doctor called family medicine. So that's the long story short of that. My mom was like, if we had called family medicine, her previous doctor to that was an internal medicine doctor who was more looking at later stage stuff. So it was just a really big lesson at like, this didn't have to happen. Now, if you fast forward to what happened with COVID, it's very similar. A lot of the COVID treatments actually killed a lot of people because they were already compromised for that drug that was pushed through because we're trying to save lives. Well, we were also killing them at the same time. I hate to say that. It's not conspiracy theory. It is true. It happens all the time. You end up with it, and that's what's happening now with chronic conditions. People have multiple chronic conditions. They have multiple drugs, and they're contraindicating with each other, and they're killing people. And it's not really, you don't really see it because it's not usually recorded that way until you live it, like I did with my mom. And with my dad, I'm not gonna lie, I saved his life last year from a UTI because he had prostate and he had all this other stuff, and so nobody wanted to touch him. And I'm like, he's gonna die from a UTI. But they can't see the whole picture of the patient. They can only see what they can see and the liability associated with it if they don't follow the rules. And that's what we saw with my mom, is like the liability of not treating her was on one doctor, but the other doctor could have said, don't do it. And that was like, okay. I was angry. And I was like, but I'm not one to complain, which I just did, I think 5 minutes complaining of it. Build a solution.
Absolutely. I think it's that personal experience, right, that helps you build the change that you want to see. And I think it's, people out there hearing that experience as well, right, that makes them want to make that impact. And I think one of the simplest things that I want to understand is, why do you think something so simple with the data flow, understanding different comprehensive insights plus the liability aspect builds into the system today? Why do you think that is?
You have technology is competitive in a public service. You have to do right by the bigger good. You have to be somebody who comes in and says, I need to solve this problem. And there's a lot of competition, and there's a lot of rules that had to be set that would allow the standards to catch up, that says, hey, so-and-so has to share with so-and-so. So even if you say, hey, I want to share this data with this person, you still have competitive nature in the way, okay? Honestly, you got technology who's like, well, I don't want to share the data, right? And you're like, well, you're going to have to, because data, everybody says whoever holds the data is king. So there was a lot of that, and the rules on sharing were not written correctly, or not recent, I should say, when they wrote meaningful use and some of these other terminologies that drove the data sharing, they didn't take into account that, guess what, competitors aren't going to share with competitors. So they've caught that up. That was number one. It was more political early on than it was technology wise. Two, you have patient security and privacy. And in order to, the way HIPAA was built, it was assuming it's a little bit of the honor code. HIPAA is like, hey, if you share private health information of this patient, you're liable if that gets out to somebody else. So if I'm sharing data with all of these doctors, I have to have paperwork between all of these doctors to make sure that when I'm sharing it with you, I don't get sued. And so that piece has to catch up as well, and has caught up. And so COVID slowed it down, but then COVID, because of what happened and people dying, we're like, we've got to accelerate it. And you'll probably see in the recent administration where they're like, data interoperability is the big topic again. It's like, how do we get people sharing it and reducing risk on the doctors for sharing the right data at the right time, which is also why Ursamin is the right play for us, is to make sure that we're like, hey, we do role-based access to data that ensures HIPAA is our problem, not yours as the doctor. So it's about eliminating these barriers that are really more politically driven and security for the patient driven, right? You don't want your patient data everywhere, and there's a lot of bad actors out there. I mean, you see all the breaches, Change Healthcare got hacked. There's a lot of hacking going on, and there's a lot of people who will say, hey, I want your data for a good reason, and then they go sell your data. I can't tell you, every time I pitch to certain investors, that they would go like, well, are you considering selling that data when you get it? And I'm like, yeah, but I could, but that's an erosion of the trust of the people that are allowing me to help them give better care. So if my goal is to take that data and sell it later, then those people aren't going to want to work with me. So there's that too, where you've got, a very big skepticism of the clinical workforce that says, are you guys going to use my data or the patient data for nefarious reasons?
I know you've worked in edge technology, major network upgrades. How would you say, your experience in telco has really impacted what you're seeing in the data flow and the challenges there, especially everything that you're doing at Ursamin?
On data flow, well, it's identical. The way service provider, telco is a service provider. A service provider is obviously anybody provides a service. We call them service providers on the technology side. And so they sell to thousands of people, right? Consumers, your cell phone. You have 64 million or 342 million people in the country. So everybody's going to get a service, usually some sort of phone service, whatever that is. And you have levels of operations, and you have procedures. We have unions. Everything about the way healthcare is set up, from a buying cycle and a structural cycle, is the same as a telco. And the data where it's needed is the same. So that's why when I started looking at healthcare and I said edge, the edge of a cellular network is just before you get it on your phone or your TV. And it's called the central office. So the central office is where that data is, it's called data offload. And you might say, hey, listen, let's think about it. You have a Fitbit and you're getting tons of data off your Fitbit. The doctor wants to see your data. They don't want all data. They want a piece of data. So that's what we did on the telco side. It was the same idea. And the cable companies were like, Netflix, as a good example, we're doing streaming. Well, you want to push the data, you want to push the videos to the central office, and then whoever wants to pull it from there can utilize it. So when you want to, well, I guess I repeat watch Blacklist, I'm not going to lie. So it's probably cached in the CO down the on the right. So that's the same idea. It's the edge, and you're going, where when you need to use the data the most, is it the most cost effective? It is most cost effective to push it as close to the customer, the last mile, as possible. And the doctor is that role. It doesn't mean that there aren't other places for the data. We used to separate control plane and management plane, and you push some of it up to the headquarters, and some of it needs to be local. Not all Fitbit data needs to go up to the headquarters. It's a very expensive technological proposition. So we really look at architecture, cost effectiveness, scalability, and removal of noise. So if you send all of your Fitbit data to the doctor, you're going to flood the network, you're going to flood their head, and they can't process anything. Same exact process in telco. Remember that? You remember the "Can you hear me now"?
No, I have not heard that.
Oh, you don't remember the "Can you hear me now" slogan?
No.
Oh, come on. It's totally dating myself. Everybody wanted oh, God, what are you, like 18?
Little older.
It was because all these guys... Just picking on you. Because everybody trying to get on their cell phones crashed the network because it was everybody trying to pull from the network and crash the network. Sorry, guys, whoever's listening. It's probably a young population. Go look up Can You Hear Me Now? It's a funny ad.
Yeah. No, I think with what you're saying there, I guess what do you think other healthcare leaders can maybe learn and leverage from your telco experience to implement into their own organizations, into their own startups?
Data architectures in a big scaled network. The health systems have it, right? Everybody's in a network. The difference with the telco network, like you have independence, you have last mile providers, you have the exact same setup. So if you can look at the data and where it needs to sit and what data is needed where, separation of control and management plane, or the management plane and the data plane. Management plane, data plane. Management is what do you need to see in order to provide better care? What do you need to see because you're trying to access the data and do analytics? So yeah, so it really comes down to looking at what can they learn? What can they learn from telco is understanding of where data sits and how to most cost effectively provide that and make decisions collectively with how you're going to push that out. And you can do it. Listen, everybody can put the data where they want, but if you define what data is needed at what level, and I don't see that really happening. You see the point solutions happening. You see like, hey, I have this problem today because the way healthcare comes at a problem is we need evidence-based solutions. So we need to prove that you have a medical improvement in order for us to implement a technology. And that can take up to 17 years to make that definition. The challenge is that healthcare as technology moves rapidly. And if you define what you need at the different points of care, it doesn't matter. The evidence base will be there. You're just asking the products in that space to do what they do best. And then you get a better set of products like me. And that's what we're trying to set standards. And we're like, listen, at this stage, this is what data is needed. And there's a reason why. And once you've defined that and you've defined the impact on the cost, well, now you have vendors building towards a spec, and then you have a better ecosystem. And that's what telco does well. Telco does very well with because the difference between them and healthcare is Verizon has 69 million customers. They can't afford not to do a really hard financial cost on the technology. They upgrade every 15 years and they have to define those data requirements at each point in the network. And then they build the ecosystem around it so they get the competitive nature and they get the price point and they get everything they want. In healthcare, you've got health systems competing with each other and not working together to form technology ecosystem that will support them. They're using technology as a competitive weapon as opposed to using working technology to make the competitors step up to what you want. And that's just a reversal in thinking. And that's what I hope to start to push out with our kind of thought process, which is like, let's really start to define where data needs to sit for the best use case. And then once we have that, all of us vendors, then we're just fighting to see who can be the best. And that's what you want.
What do you think that could do for, the health infrastructure? Because a lot of the health infrastructure, as you mentioned, is legacy systems. There's old software people are still using. What do you think that could look like for the future?
What does it look like? It gives you what you end up with is I think of circles. I think of the core, which is like an EMR is a core. It's where the data is housed. It's where you do operations. Your next level is going to be specialist, the primary care. That's a third level. So think about I always do like a tech stack, and each level has a defined tech stack, which forces everybody to compete, and you get better options and you get better choices. And vendors, you get the price point you want. That's the wonderful thing is you just beat us all up because it becomes, I don't want to say a commodity, but that's what you're doing. You're driving pricing down for you. And so you drive prices down across the industry. If you look at the exorbitant price of the EMRs and some of these systems, I don't blame them for what they're doing, but it's because you're trying to use the EMR for everything. And that cost structure doesn't fit in primary care. That cost structure doesn't fit in home care. So you have vendors, really good EMRs that are built for a primary care office because their cost structure and the way they built that technology to handle that tooling, it was built on more efficient cost structures so that it can be afforded by that group. Versus a core, and you see it in telco as well, the core is a very expensive because it's really big data. That's expensive. But if you start to diffract redirect the cost further out in the network where it's a fair scalability, I think that's what you gain, right? You really gain an ecosystem where you control the pricing and you control what you get versus what happens today, which is the existing vendors. There's a lot of monopolies, in all fairness. There are like people who are just leaning towards one platform, but one size does not fit all. And so that's where you see the burnout with the doctors, you see the burnout with the clinicians, because you're trying to make a legacy technology which doesn't fit. You're trying to force it because you've already got, it's called technology debt. And by that, it means you sunk a bunch of money into technology. Now you got to figure out how to milk it for years. Well, you can. There's ways to do that there's ways to do that once you've defined that edge. Long answer. Final answer.
Perfect answer.
Final answer.
No,
Sorry.
no, that's good. That's good. I think with what you're saying, I guess, how do you think, obviously there's tons of physicians, clinicians being stretched thin, right? There's more people that are facing chronic conditions, especially especially in the US, as populations get older. I guess, where do you see the biggest opportunity leverages to really help improve and automate, care coordination in the healthcare industry?
Well, I mean, selfishly, it's what I'm doing, Ursamin. It's in between primary care and specialty care because that's where patients are getting recycled and pushed out and not getting care. And I think within that, if you bring in the microscope, you like Google search, right? You know how you can keep going further. So take the big picture, I think primary care to specialty care, because chronic conditions is about managing all of those different things you have going on. That data circle of coordination, there's 4 circles when it comes to coordination: hospital to specialty care, hospital to skilled nursing facility, primary care to specialty care, primary care to community, which is the SDOH, social determinants of health. I believe that this opportunity, because nobody has really done it, is that primary care to specialty care, where all of the gaps are happening. Like my mother, is that lack of communication. It's the hardest space. So but it's also the biggest opportunity, because we've got this trajectory, and there's going to be so many people bouncing in between that group. I always think, oh my God, they're getting ping pong. You can see it. So whenever I told my story, it was like, oh my God, the same thing happened to me. It's that level of coordinating care in between those doctors and making sure treatment plans are moving, making sure you're not having highway crashes of the patient, making sure you're not, overdosing on medications. I had a woman send me a note the other day that her uncle almost ended up in a dementia home because of the meds he was on, not because he had dementia. There's such an opportunity if you look at it from a patient care perspective, patient experience and longevity for life. That spot right there makes such a difference in people's trajectory, whether they move to the next step, which is going into specialty care and hospital. If we can control that piece, you're talking about significant increased quality of life, reduction in development of more diseases. So what we're all dealing with, chronic conditions, is a result of inflammation. So we solved that people are dying from things, but now you've got all this inflammation. The longer inflammation goes on, the more you're going to spiral into whatever particular disease that your genetics predisposes you to. So if we can manage that and control the inflammation and control the bouncing around and the damage that gets done in that scenario, you now have a significant impact on lives. Financially, it's also the largest opportunity from a data perspective. The data that's being produced is also sitting in that space because Fitbits, because of IoT, Internet of Medical Things. All of the consumers have health apps, Fitbits, Garmin's, cardiology, Garmin's for glucometers. I was looking at a diabetes picture the other day, and there's 14,000 diabetic devices that are being used by consumers. Enormous amount of data. So how do we stop that data from coming into the network and flooding the network? And then how do we pull out what's useful? So it's a great opportunity where patient care matches revenue opportunity for anybody who's willing to jump in the craziness.
Yeah, I think with what you mentioned there in the data flow, I guess, what do you see as the most critical features to really help prevent, the bad conditions and bad outcomes that we see, especially stuff that you're building at Ursamin?
Visibility into the treatment plans. I think the number one frustration is the ability to stay in front of a patient's treatment plans. The average patient, we have patients living with multiple chronic conditions. There's 65 million people in the country who have multiple, 2 or more. That's going to double in the next 15, 20 years. So half of our adult population is going to have multiple chronic conditions, and the average number of doctors is 7 to 9. Their care teams, it goes up to 15 to 25. These guys are making decisions all day long on your treatments, just like my mom, all day long. In my pilots, I was like, that's what happened to my mom. The data didn't flow. And how simple that one data flow would have happened. The feature is going to be insight into the treatment plans, collision course, what's on a collision path of those treatments, our ability to read the data, and this is where the data workflows that the clinicians are working on is to say, congestive heart failure patient medication it might improve congestive heart failure quality of life, but it actually impacts chronic kidney disease. And so you're on this medication and you're driving the chronic kidney disease into the ground. The idea being that the feature is we can see the treatment plan, we can flag that actually the medication that you have is going to actually cause another situation you have going on to deteriorate, like my mom, which was an immediate deterioration of the lungs from the chemo. Hey, she doesn't have cancer, but she's dead. I said it in jest. She's probably hitting me in the back of the head. The treatment plans is the number one feature, and our ability to take action on it is the sweet spot. It's hard, but it's the sweet spot. And our ability to help the doctors uncluster, I'll say, what that plan is. So how do I look at all of those 7 to 9 doctors, 7 to 9 treatment plans? How do I keep an eye on any time those might be changing? Because remember, your diseases are progressing over a period of time, and so they have to stay in front of it. So the more we can automate that and not rely on people, that's going to make such a huge impact.
Do you think there's any other features that you would tout as critical to help prevent bad conditions?
The bad condition, there's so many other features that are valuable to our clinical workforce for scaling capacity to help these patients. So I'd say the other piece would be empowering patient care is the task PANES, PANES, is in showing that like, hey, this patient needs a phone call on this change and needs help getting into this care. So what happens in the workflow is the care teams, as opposed to the doctor being able to, what I just told you about treatment plans is about stopping a bad result. The management of your care is about empowering the care teams to look at your condition and say, oh, you haven't had an appointment. We need to get you into this appointment. So being able to flag that a patient is stuck in cycling, I call it like recycling, like the button on your screen, if you get that, like, hey, it's thinking. That's what happens. Patients get cycled in. It takes 6 months to get in to see a neurologist. I just was told that stat the other day, 6 months. And a patient might need to see somebody in 2 weeks. So how do you identify that and then trigger to the nurse or the care coordinator to call that patient and figure out how to get them access to care? It doesn't matter where. It doesn't have to stay in the system, because the system is set up to have you just move to the next step, right? Our neurologist is in the system. Well, that system doesn't have capacity, so we need to redirect that patient elsewhere. And the only person who can do that is the care team. We can't do that from a technology perspective, and the patient can't do that because they've got to go through payer and it's got to be approved and your doctor has to approve it. So the more we can empower the doctors and the care teams to reroute you when you need care and look at that, that's going to be about access and capacity. That's the other big, I think, feature that's critical.
I know we touched on telco a little bit, but I wanted to touch on something that we had a conversation about that you think, telecommunication professionals are suited for healthcare. Can you dive into that a little bit more, what your thoughts are? I know we had discussed the regulations and, the critical challenges that are faced in that industry as well, but could you speak a bit more on that?
They're strategic thinkers. They're very strategic thinkers. We used to fight a lot in my previous companies about telecom versus enterprise. Enterprise thinks in, speed, growth. It's about being competitive. You're enabling. The reason you're fast and you're quick and you move on and you just keep going is because in enterprise and non-regulated industries, healthcare and telecom are regulated, fintech is regulated, because everybody has to have access. In retail, hospitality, et cetera, everybody has choice. So you have to run really fast to be competitive. In healthcare, you're trying to integrate new valuable health remedies and or improvements while maintaining highest levels of quality. It's not about speed. It's why I always say, like, sometimes, like VCs, if you're going to raise money with a VC, make sure that VC can live with, I used to say when I was selling telco, and when somebody would call me and say, hey, can you help us? I'd be like, do you have the stomach for it? Because it's going to take a long time. it's going to take 2 years just to get them warmed up to the whole process of changing operations, because it costs them $10 million to put in a new vendor. And then there's another 2 years where you have to go through an RFP process that requires you to do XYZ. So so telecom is a 3 to 4 year sales cycle, because they only change out every 15 years. You have to bring in people who have that, and quality, because quality impacts in telco. I don't know if you've ever been in a TV outage or cable outage or something like that, right? And everybody's like, my TV. We built networks in cable for two days. The biggest day, guess what the biggest day is that you build your quality around? It's really funny. I don't even know if they have it anymore. You'd say, like, some people say NFL, the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
It's Victoria's Secret show.
Really?
Yes. Victoria's Secret show, and they do it around the highest porn times. It's crazy, which is at 3 a.m. and noon. And noon. I'm like, wait a second, hold on. I understand it's a boys' club, but now I got to contend with the fact that I know that noon, okay, way down the wrong path. But point being is, quality is like, you're going to have people slamming the network. And so you cannot go down. If you go down, it's billions of dollars, and you are fired. You always know where the network went down. You're like, oh, that sales rep is fired, or that company is going to get kicked out, because you can't. It's called 6 nines. In healthcare, people die. You have to have that same level of quality expectation. I was just telling my partner, I was like, don't undersell your telco background, because your need to build a quality solution and your willingness to sit with it and really prove it out, that you got to have the stomach for it. I've been doing it for 4 years, thinking about this, ideating and figuring out. And they're like, Shannon, you got to be less risk averse. And I'm like, I will, but I also recognize that if you make a bad move, one, you're going to kill people. You are literally going to kill people. And also understand that we are just technology, so we don't, but we could hurt other people in the process of not doing it right. So I think from that perspective, telco people have the same mentality, and they also understand the biggest challenge for healthcare, a second biggest challenge, is humans, how many people we have, right? We don't have even technologists. So if you're going to pull people from outside the industry, you want to get people who have the same thought process. And it's very natural for them to think big picture, quality, longevity. You're building for 5 years out. And yes, it's annoying to those people who want to move fast. Yes, we're annoying. We're like, we'll get there when we get there. And we're very calm about it. So yeah.
No, that makes absolute sense, because that's your day to day. That's what you've known. It's a different industry.
Yeah, you got to be able to sit with it. I'll tell you, I've had many CEOs call me up and go, you need to go faster. I'm like, you don't move the telcos. They go when you tell them to go, and there's a process. If once you figure it out, you just got to figure out the process.
I think that leads to a lot of mistakes and errors. But I think, to tie to that, why do you think there's, investors, different people push for growth, maybe not always think about the quality measure? Why do you think that is? Is it, just the incentive of money, or what's going on there?
You mean investors?
Yes, or the people that you've spoken to, other CEOs.
Yeah, well, I mean, the reality is, once you take outside money, you have to move fast. So you have to hit your numbers. You can't take somebody's money and say, I won't make you more money. I mean, that's the very nature of taking outside money. And I'm in the middle of this right now. And I'm like, I forget sometimes. I gotta remember that, like, yes, you want to make money. I am going to tell you, I can tell you where you're going to make money, when you're going to make money, and how long it's going to take. And it's true. It's not a lie. It's going to take a little bit longer, but it's going to be a gobs more. And that's where, when you get in the battle, I got acquired twice. I've been part of companies where we were independent, went public, got acquired, and the increased pressure to hit numbers that everybody expects just gets pushed down. And you get it, but you don't know who promised what, and sometimes people are promising stuff. Again, that kind of goes back to, what did you promise and what are you trying to deliver? And usually that comes down to those two aren't aligned. That's why we've been really particular about trying to engage with the right potential investors who understand the system, and they can see, like, you can tell the difference in an investor conversation. If you've got somebody like, you haven't moved fast enough, you're like, okay, you don't know healthcare. Or somebody looks at my thing and they're like, oh my God, you're moving so fast. And it feels like you're going at the pace of a snail, right? But they're like, oh my God, you're moving fast compared to healthcare. And if you project and say, oh, I can move faster, well, you get kicked out of the room, because they're like, no, you can't. I mean, human behavior is human behavior. We can only go so fast. The clinicians will buy from clinicians. So your best sell is a community-based sale, and they haven't seen clinicians viral something. Like the stuff you see that's viral is because there was a need. Teladoc from COVID went viral. Zoom was part of that. We have to do remote telehealth stuff. So yeah, so it really just comes down to the investors understanding the sales cycle, and if that's not aligned, you end up, that's why, yeah. Last year when I was out fundraising, I'm like, I'm going to kill somebody. And I realized I was talking to the wrong people. I was like, you just don't understand.
It's part of the game.
Well, yeah. Well, you got to look at the investors as a sales process too, and understand that they need to make money. And if you don't fit in their thesis, and I wish there was a class. I might even do one myself where I'm like, I'm going to do a investor training 101 for new founders to help you understand. Like TikTok is starting to get a lot of VCs on it, and I'm loving it. I got to do a shout out to them on TikTok and just be like, thank you for sharing. They do it just quick bits. And they're like, listen, it's okay. If you look like this, don't go to VC. There's so many options. There's so many other options. Everybody thinks that the VC unicorn is the one way to go, but it's like the MBA. And that's what one of the other people said, is like the VC, it wasn't meant to be as prevalent as it is now in the market. It was supposed to be a niche thing, but it's gotten so over bloated. And so there's a lot of founders and a lot of bitter people that are caught in a situation of missed expectations.
How have you gone about, or what advice would you give on aligning, incentives with, investors and partners to have them really understand what's going on there? What's the advice that you'd maybe give to other founders before, maybe if you create that class?
Yeah, I would listen. I'd say really understand. Call me. Talk you off the ledge. No, I think really understand the different. Really understand if you can become like an investor yourself. Sign up to be an investor and hear the pitches and think about it as if it was your own money, and you'll start to understand how to better communicate with the investor. I think that's where, like, I did it, but not as much because I wasn't investing. And I wasn't experienced. There are classes for angels to learn how to properly invest. These people do it for a living. It's their job. That your job is not what they do. As a founder, most of them have not been founders. The best investors are those that have been founders. They're taking their money and saying, I'm going to create a fund, because they actually can be really helpful. There are some people that are just giving you money and they just want a return. And so it's just so important that you qualify and understand, get into an accelerator that can teach you about the investor stuff. Don't get into an accelerator because they're going to invest in you. I'm going to tell you, like, that doesn't happen very often. 99% of them don't. The ones that I chose were the ones that had significant experienced advisors who could tell you what's next. So they could tell you about, like, I can tell you two of my advisors I still talk to, and I call them and I'm like, what's going on with this VC or that VC, or what stage is this person, or why aren't they doing this? And he'll be like, oh yeah, this is what's going on. They've got some distractions going on. So if you can get into an accelerator that can find you mentors that become your long-term partners in the game, you're going to be better off. Your pitch becomes better. You get faster at the questions. You get more qualified. Like, I'll tell you, my conversations from just a cold call non-healthcare investor versus my conversations are so much more valuable now that I know what that investor is looking for. But it took me some time, and it took me a lot of fails. I did a couple of accelerators that were just like, they just weren't. There's accelerators are just like the investors, and that some of them are not for you. They want technical founders who they can teach. I'm a non-technical, although I'm very technical, but I'm not a coding engineer, so I don't fit in a lot of them. So just be smart and call me. Call a friend. Call a friend.
I want to tie this as well into, the future, especially with AI. And I know we had discussed, there being an orchestration layer to really harness the power of AI in healthcare. And I wanted to ask you, what does that look like in practice? And what do you think are the potential risks as that lies out in the future?
Yeah. So I think I'm an AI addict. Hands down. I get it. I even have converted completely into go AI in healthcare, because it will disrupt the conservatives who need, we need to take some risks. You got to think about consumers, and consumers are ready to go, and you're just being left behind. You're becoming irrelevant because chat and these other AIs are they're already making consumers way more knowledgeable than the clinician is half the time because they're using AI to find stuff. It's like a super huge search engine. It's Google on speed, right? For the average consumer, you're like, oh, let me Google. Well, it's easier on chat, and that's what they're saying. So I think that it needs to be adopted. I think the big challenge right now is that healthcare has not adopted role-based access. What right now is everybody comes into the same view, everybody works on the same pane, and that's why the data isn't flowing, because everybody's working in the same tools, and that is not unhookable. So by orchestration, you got to break that data down, and you need to rebuild it on a, hey, Mezue needs to see this, Shannon needs to see that, so-and-so needs to see that I call it free. I used to say free the data, because that argument was like, free it so I can get access, because I was fighting to get access to the data. Now I'm like, make it free so you can move it and use it. And that's the orchestration layer. It's a routing engine. And once you do that, then you can start applying AI on top. If you put AI on an old architecture, you're going to get some really good stuff, and you're going to get the bad along with it. And that's what you don't want to do. You always want to grow the network. And we always, in telco, we called it cap and grow. You want to grow the network. You want to re-architect the network so that it's most efficient. So when you put AI on top, you're really, really just empowering people. And you've got new kids coming out of school. I heard the stat the other day that doctors' information, which used to be 17 years to get from a study, is 72 days or something like that. They're like kids coming out of college, medical school. Their information's already outdated because of AI. And so it's making everybody more powerful individually, which makes, of course, as a whole, improves capacity. But it's also going to magnify the negatives. And the negatives are, it's a lot more work to coordinate care right now. It's all on paper. How do you AI a paper workflow? It's paper. So how does AI fix paper? I mean, you can't. You're trying to put a piece of paper on top. You're trying to put AI on a paper workflow. So you have to, the orchestration layer allows you to automate it, and then you can throw in AI. So right now, my fear is that everybody is forgetting. It's, my story about architecting and where the data needs to flow. Great. You're just perpetuating this big thing, and you're getting the AI, and you're making that database very useful to a couple of people in the industry. It's not making it useful for the rest of the world.
No. As we mentioned, right, healthcare is highly regulated, slow to change. And I think one of the big things that we talk here in, conversation is innovation, right? And aim to be bold in healthcare, obviously reasonably. And so how do you balance that, need for innovation with the reality of, long sales cycles? Do you have public-private partnerships and entrenched interests in healthcare? How do you balance all this with innovation, but also the cycles?
Deep question. I think that there are so many problems to solve in healthcare that it's all innovation. I don't think it's innovation in the traditional sense. If you enjoy saying, how do I apply this technology to this problem, there is so much innovation, like almost to the point, like I found myself so far in the, like, oh my God, we can solve this and we can solve that. It's like a kid in a candy shop. So it's not like innovation, like, hey, I'm writing my own LLM or my own, AI bot that does XYZ. That is one type of innovation. Okay. One type of innovation is I'm creating a whole new technology. And I used to hang out with all those guys that I used to call them like the nutty professors who are like, let me re-architect the RF. My founders at Ruckus were like that. He had this architected RF antenna, and he was like, we did this and we did that. And you're like, so cool. So very cool. But if you are upgrading an industry that is so desperate, and I just had this conversation with another product manager, so desperate for innovation. And by innovation, you're just taking other stuff and helping them apply it to their problem. That's a dream for me. That's what I love doing. I've done it in every edge. I'm like, oh my God, like Wi-Fi. Listen, Wi-Fi was already prevalent before I brought it into service provider. It had already been beaten up. It had already been through the test, which these conservative industries are late. They're laggard customers. So if you think of them like that, a laggard customer coming along because they're slow, you can innovate wherever you want. You're just not building. You just can't be prideful in the technology itself, because that's not what you're doing. You're taking technology and you're applying it in a unique way. I can't tell you how many times I have had to restate what I do to try and get them to understand. Like, I used to say edge, I used to say this, and then I started saying this, and everybody was like, well, I don't understand that. I'm like, half the time I'm just trying to figure out how to communicate the same technology in a way that they can process it and accept it. And then all of a sudden you'll see, oh, you can do that? You're like, And they're like, seriously? You're like, and it's, listen, Mizzou, it's not, we're like, it's not that big of a deal. I'm like, oh my God, like even the stuff that we have as consumers, they don't even have. So the joy that you can get in showing people how to apply technology, and then it's not that hard. That look on their face is like, if you really want to see people happy. One doctor last week, he told me I was the savior. He called me the savior. I'm like, I'm not a savior. I go, come on, that's really exalting. I go, he's like, I wouldn't have quit if you were around. And it's almost embarrassing because he does that. And I love him for it because he was literally, his story is such a tragic, difficult, I shouldn't say tragic because he's in a great place now, but man, he was burned out. Mental health, suicide is happening in the healthcare workforce. So you got to look at innovation differently. If you can't grasp that innovation comes in many ways, and there's a guy, Christian, that is his name. One of my mentors just said, look at him, and it's about disruption. And I said, listen, it's not sexy. I go, I don't know how to get ahead of the AI story because what we do is just plumbing. It's just plumbing. It's not sexy. So people are like, nobody wants to do. And he goes, look at this. And they go, this disruptive just made what's a really expensive thing cheaper so that it made it accessible for everybody. That's innovation. So we just got to remember that innovation is defined in different ways, and it doesn't have to just be techie. I'm really cool. I built an AI platform, which, again, I love it, and all you guys building it, shout out. Please do that, because guess what's going to happen? Once everybody's beating them up, I get to go use it and put it into my customers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's something I was speaking to another leader, right, about, innovation in healthcare. It's not disruption and, oh, we're crazy, we're adding all these new things. That's not really what's going to help change healthcare. It's the simple things, the simple aspects, simple ways of thinking about, new things that is really, it's almost like bringing fire,
Yeah.
to different people, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, we could do this. And you're like, well, yeah, this kind of been around for a while, but it's the way you're applying it, right, that is different. And really bringing about the change. And that's what I learned. It's the problem in healthcare. It's like you have a huge wall that you're looking at. You're like, oh my goodness, how am I going to climb over this thing, right? But then when you get over that wall, it's not like there's multiple layers of the walls. It's just that it was so hard to climb that it looked near impossible. And if you're able to break through it, there's monumental change that can happen. At least that's the way I think about it. And I think that's a reason that a lot of founders are probably going to fail, right? Is because they think they have to add the new sexy thing, or they're thinking about it in a certain way that's not really the true ethos of what healthcare is about, and understanding the true principles of what healthcare is. That's my own personal take. I'm not sure what you'd say, but yeah.
Right there with you. It is. It's a long wall. It's a big, heavy. We used to say it's a big barrier to entry. Telco is the same way. That's why you say, do you have the stomach for it? Healthcare is bigger than I ever imagined. Terrifying at times, where you're like, wow, that wall is way bigger than it's like when you're walking down the beach and the hotel that you're looking at keeps getting farther away. Healthcare is a little like that because you think you've been through the pace, and then you go, oh no, I didn't see that wall was 17 years to climb. And I remember the first time I realized that the startups that succeeded, it was like 10 years. And I was like thinking old school, like 4. I thought 4 was long. And then you're like, wow. And so to your point, it's such a massive change though. Like it is workflow driven. It is workflow and operational process. And once you're in, if you can hang in there, and to your point, people are going to give up. They give up. It's easy. Trust me. I saw that where I was like, I can't do it. And my friend picked up the phone and said, get your fanny off the floor and keep going. It's the right reason why. And there's reasons abound for a why. If you're not looking for your why, and your why is only, hey, I got this really cool technology and I want to be a startup founder, it's probably go pick retail or something a little bit less. You can play more than in healthcare, where it's a more serious conversation.
Absolutely. And
Very rewarding though. Very rewarding.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think one of the things that you've spoken candidly about, right, is the emotional toll of building in healthcare. What do you think is the support systems that have really helped you in your journey? I know you've mentioned, a couple people, but I want to understand a bit more, that, and maybe the audience can understand a little bit more as well.
Yeah. So find people mission driven. That's the number one thing I tell everybody is anybody that's in your circle should be mission driven. One of my mentors who's from Launch New York, he goes, Shannon, when people fall in love with the problem, he goes, the best startup founders fall in love with the problem. And if you surround yourself with people who aren't in love with that problem and solving it, you will find yourself burned out and no supporters who are in it, and they fall by the wayside. And they, and anybody's why can be whatever that why is, but it has to be aligned with the problem and the mission, and either have a personal story. I mean, I can show you all the people that have come and gone out of Ursamin, and I can tell you which ones will last. I can tell you which of my mentors will last. You are in love with the problem. You're in love with the impact that you can do to make a difference. You don't ever talk about money. You talk about your customers, and your customer obsessed with the customer that you serve. And I don't mean that from a sales perspective. I truly mean, like, I've become obsessed with the clinical teams, and I'm like, if you can't live that, and the people around you can't live that. And so, like, my accelerators, I got better at picking accelerators who were also obsessed about that group. Like Nashville Project Healthcare, shout out to them. I'll actually hashtag them. Huge, huge, huge change in my process, because they are the clinical, like, accelerator, where, like, if you really want to know how to navigate inside healthcare, which is really important, who you sell to, how you sell to, who is your buyer, who is your user, how do you not say the wrong thing to the wrong person that's going to make you lose a deal. They're amazing at helping you see the thought process. And I remember the gentleman who's mentor, Eric Threlkill, he has a podcast. He asked me after one of the trips to one of the health systems, he goes, what do you think? I go, it's just amazing, fascinating information. I go, really helpful for me as I go back and build the product to know who am I building for and what am I building to. And he goes, that's the right answer. Just learn, absorb, find the people who understand your problem, who live it. Because there's nobody in healthcare. You hear that there's a wall, but there are so many people who want you in. And it's funny, with every year, it's like the longer I hang in, the more friends I automatically get. Because she's made it this far. She hasn't left yet. So we'll pull her back in. So yeah, that's what I tell anybody is surround yourself with people who are mission driven.
How else do you go about thinking about team and how they can face resilience? I know we had talked about, you love hiring and working with clinicians, technologists and entrepreneurs. But again, it all depends on the why. How do you think about building a team that can be resilient and can also last with you as a founder in the journey? Because you have to love the people you work with, right, to love the journey that you're building upon.
Yeah. Their own resilience is really important. Their history of either breaking out of what they've done, being a icebreaker, glass break, I don't know what we want to call it, groundbreaker, being a bit disruptive, knowing that it takes some of the best people on my team. Like when we were in crazy disruption, and I'm just apologizing for the craziness because I don't know how to explain this fiasco going on in Ursamin, which is just like the latest spin, and we're trying to get everybody to move, and it tends to be really disruptive. And he's like, it's what happens. Chaos before calm. Like, it was just so natural. So I made a lot of bad choices. Like with inside the clinician choice, I made a lot of wrong choices, not bad choices, wrong choices with people who I knew had the skill set, but didn't have the temperament to live through a startup. Startup's hard. You got to think about it. How do you get obsessed with the customer, pull the customer into your organization so that you become like your customer, but then also realize that your customer is very conservative in a startup where everything is about risk and you might be out of business the next day. So bringing that together was really, really hard. And I asked I asked this leader of one of the health systems in Nashville, I said, how do you hire for clinical? And they told me, go to the universities, they go get informatics. I was like, what? And they go clinical informatics. And I go, found out that there's a whole group of clinical, all they do is medical data. And their personality and everything about them was like, boom, boom, boom. As soon as I flipped them into my company, it was like, oh, now you have to deal with the startup mentality too. So you really have to pick. Oh, they also said, listen, don't feel bad. The average success rate of hiring a clinical person into a technology company is 9%. I had a 75% hire rate back in my old days. I could hire. That was a really humbling moment of my ability to hire. So it's really about understanding their resiliency. Look at them like they're coming into a startup, understand what it takes to be in a startup and the comfort with discomfort, the change element, the testing element that you're constantly testing, you're iterating. Know that you're iterating because you don't want to be iterating with the customer. You want to be iterating before you go to the customer. You want to iterate where you don't do damage. You want to iterate before scale. And so you really have to think about how you pick your people from a personality perspective as well as skill set, and then And then, of course, if you get mission driven, well, now you've got somebody who doesn't give up. And it's hard to find, but you just keep looking for that kind of group. There's a lot of apologizing that goes on. I'm not going to lie. You also got to be like, listen, it was a little crazy. I just had to, like the other day, I was like, I'm the problem. I don't know what I'm doing. And when I say I don't know what you mean, I mean, I don't know what you mean. I've never heard that before. I need you to treat me like a 5-year-old who you're just teaching and teach me what you mean. I just said that this morning to somebody. I go, if you're going to do this, you got to remember that I don't have 25 years of medical practice. I need you to get it through my head without wanting to rip your hair out. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge.
Mm-hmm. I guess tying to that, right, building a team, we talked about, breaking into healthcare, right? And there's the one coin of, hey, there's people that are wanting to see, right? They're not letting you in immediately. They want to see if you can break through and actually innovate, but that takes time. So they have to test you, right?
Yes.
And there's also, entrenched interest in healthcare. Let's call it what it is. And so how do you go about, and what's your advice maybe to, innovators to really break through, right? And make sure that they're aligning incentives, right, with the people that want to test you, the entrenched interests that are already there to build the best solutions out there to help people.
If you're in healthcare, I guess I'm a little bit unique in that I wasn't healthcare. So for me, the answer was go find people who got it and just follow them religiously and beg for help. I don't know how the incentive models grew. Like today, a doctor called me, said, listen, Shannon, he showed me all the pages. Like, it's right here. I'm like, I got a pitch next week, and I don't know how to tell him what the incentive plan is. What does this look like? So for me, I didn't understand it. And I also found inside healthcare, even if you are inside healthcare, understand that you're going to have blockers. Again, when somebody wins, somebody loses. That's the nature of competition. And again, mentors, accelerators, getting the right accelerators who go like, listen, Eric Threlkill said, Shannon, the way you win is you make sure that the people who want to block you, they have no reason to block you because they're big. There's big entrenched interests all over the place, and they got a lot more money, and so they're able to block you from a competitive standpoint. It just, it's what you do. And so if you are outside healthcare, learning very quickly who your alliances should be with, who has regular interest, but part of that is identifying. Like for us, we took a long time to identify our final buyer. So I was talking to a lot of competitors I didn't know. So you'll know when you're in the wrong spot because you get yelled at and talked down to a lot. And when you are in the right spot, you find a lot of friends. So definitely heed the warning signs of when you're talking to the right person. If you're inside healthcare, most people I have found that people inside healthcare tend to stick with their lane. You have to really get yourself outside of your lane, because I brought in a lot of people from like hospitals that I thought because they had the knowledge inside the hospitals, they could bring that to primary care. And I learned that they couldn't. They just didn't understand the workflow. They didn't understand the measurements. It's kind of a unique way to align yourself with the right people, is just find your buyer, find your user more so, because I always like the user, and then just figure out who sells to them.
I know we talked about as well, the different competitors, right? There's certain people that are focused on value-based care, where you guys are more focused on the workflow within care coordination. How do you guys kind of see yourself maybe complementing or differentiating yourselves within the space?
There's so much room for everybody. I mean, there's room for everybody. I can tell you all of the competitors are people that I would partner with. In a regulated environment, we saw the same thing in telco. You got very few competitors that do the same thing. Cisco used to call it co-opetition. So you work with your competitor, you're like, listen, this is what I want, this is what you want. As long as you're clear up front that you have different plans, like the value-based payer guys are really great. Listen, the value-based payers specialize, the vendors who do that specialize in HCC and RAF coding about risk groups, and then tracking and managing the financial side that I can do, but I'm like, that's not, be good. Like they say, do one thing and do it well. The clinicians even say it. They're like, just stop trying to be everything to everyone. So if there was somebody out there that was directly competing with me, then I'd be like, okay, but that's not really, we differentiate ourselves in that value-based care. Our workflow means it doesn't matter. You all have the same process. It's a clinical workflow. It's medically driven. It's evidence-based, research-driven workflow. There's no incentive behind it. How you decide to act behaviorally is driven by your practice goals. And so we just have to empower the practice goals, where those guys actually help set up profitability metrics and things like that within the incentive program itself. So it's more of a fintech play than a healthcare play. Nothing wrong with it. You can have both of us if you want. It becomes expensive though. At some point we got to consolidate. That's why we're like, well, maybe we partner and we find a way to cost effectively do it together so they get the best of both worlds.
Gotcha. My last question for you before we go into the lightning round is, looking into the future, I guess, what do you hope your vision will be for care coordination and patient empowerment, as technology and policy changes over the coming decade?
I think I'll go back to my answer in the first part, the icebreaker, which is I think knowledge, I think data combined with knowledge is the key to solving what has been a decades long problem. I think the knowledge of what that data means is really critical to patients. I have converted completely just giving patients data. I was mad before because the access to the data was preventing me to get care for my mom. But the ideal world is the data comes with knowledge, and if that can't be a doctor, then put it together in my app and help me read it, and then have an escalation plan where if I don't understand it, then I can escalate. So I think patients have to be empowered, but I think we need to bring these things together. Otherwise, you're just, everybody's spitting out data on the portal and the patients are left to chat GPT it. And we all know what happens there. I mean, nobody gains when we're all allowed to Google because it's all SEO driven. It's all driven by money. It's not driven by medical research. That's why I feel like if you did an app that has the medical knowledge that's already pre-vetted by the medical community as research backed in front of hey, here's the articles, read this and then let us know if you still have questions. That's powerful stuff. Not everybody's going to want to do it. Some people just want to be told what to do. But those of us, and I think the younger generations are adamantly looking for information on their health, would eat it up and we'd have a healthier society.
Now, onto the lightning round. What do you think is most overlooked skill, in being a founder in healthcare?
Optimism. The ability, I know we called it persistence, but it's the ability to find the good. The ability to find the good, and breathe through the bad. The optimism and you have to have that. If you don't have that, that's why negative Nellies come on my team. I'm like, get off.
Now onto the next question is, in one sentence, what do you think is the biggest barrier to seamless care coordination in today's environment?
Knowing what data needs to go, knowing what data needs to move. That's the biggest thing. Right now we're vomiting data in every direction. That's not one sense. Knowing what data needs to move. What data do you need and where does it need to go to?
And my last question is, what trend or technology do you think will have the biggest impact on chronic management care?
What technology trend will have the biggest impact? I think what I'm doing, selfishly, but the trend within that is the data usability. Data usability is the key. That's where it's like, what data do you need and where does it need to go? Usability and streamlining, not just creating and vomiting data. I keep using that word. I know everybody hates that word, but I'm like, it's not creating and then just here's my big, all they did was put it on paper and hand it to another person. You're like, no. I want you to take your paper, digitalize it, and then just give me one piece of it and have it look like this. So data usability is a term that I've been using a lot, is data usability, which is how do we make it where we can use it faster and be more efficient as people. That's what's going to solve the problem.
Perfect. Shannon, I know we touched on a lot of things, and I think this is a very engaging conversation. What are your final thoughts, in everything that we discussed?
This is all innovators who are watching, right? Please come do it. Please come do it. That's my final. Please come do it. Don't give up. I tell you, listen, I can't tell you how many people want the help if you can get past your own fear, confusion, overwhelmed. Even the doctors all know this. All the doctors on my team are like, I can't believe you're surviving. They're like, Shan, you're doing a good job at not getting it because there's so much noise. So I have been saying I want to see more thought leaders and data, and we need more technologists, and so don't be afraid. Jump in healthcare in particular. We need it, and find friends and don't lose alone. Don't be alone, because my old boss used to say don't lose alone because I was in sales, and we were like, yeah, bring a friend. They need it. You just also got to be prepared for the journey, so you might want to bring a backpack and some food along the way and make sure that you've got sustenance for a pretty long journey, and it can be very successful and very rewarding.
Well, Shannon, thank you for your time again.
Thank you.
Where can people find you if they choose to do so?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. My email, you can do shannon@ursamin.com. Ursamin. I won't labor you with my last name, but I am on LinkedIn, Shannon Aylesworth, and I'm on the other platforms, but I don't do much on them. So feel free to email me. I'd love to hear from you. Happy to take a call with anybody. I had a lot of people that grabbed my hand and pulled me up, so let me know how I can help.
Shannon,
Thank
thank
you.
you for your time on the K in Clarity podcast.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.